The new consciousness is, existentially speaking, not new. Of course, it's been in existence ever since the beginning of time. What has happened is that instead of this consciousness becoming the collective consciousness of mankind, we had a different idea of how we wanted our collective society to go. And so this consciousness, the higher consciousness of God union, got put on the shelf at some point, and we, in human society, we no longer have that as the consciousness of the common man. Now, it isn't new, because there have been many individuals throughout this age of man that have laid hold of this consciousness individually in their own lives, privately, and lived by it. And so this consciousness is not new, but for it to become the consciousness, the collective consciousness of mankind, would be very new. Individually, it's never easy, but there's really nothing stopping an individual. There's nothing opposing us or hindering us as individuals. We can go into the privacy of our rooms, our bathtubs, wherever you want to go to be private, and you can go inward and find the new consciousness all on your own. But collectively, it's a whole different matter, because there has been throughout this age a resistance to it collectively, and there are actually situations where the new consciousness was close to blossoming collectively, but it was stopped. And the reason for this is it's many different reasons, but mostly just that people have become comfortable with the present Adamic consciousness that we have, and there's been a certain element of status quo strength that wants to continue with what we have, and so they've opposed any collective shift. The difference between religion and spirituality is mostly has to do with organization. Spirituality is religious, and true religion is spiritual. But religion has become organized to the point that in many cases it's no longer spiritual. And the reason that this happens is because organization takes a lot of the life out of these values, spiritual values, and there's oftentimes corruption, and anyway, this is what's happened. This is the trend. When spirituality becomes organized, it becomes religion, and it loses its power. Jesus has been taken as a religious icon through the history of this age. And they've turned him into God, or part of the Godhead. And this has been done more so that people can receive a vicarious spiritual injection. In other words, it's made people lazy themselves, and instead of seeking within themselves, they've been taught that all they have to do is believe in Jesus and everything will happen for them from the outside in. But the fact is that Jesus was an amazing spiritual teacher, And this is why he's so important to the new consciousness. His teaching is veiled. It's not obvious. You have to really seek within yourself to understand the full implications of his teaching. But his teaching is extremely powerful, and it is totally spiritual life in its essential form. I don't think there's ever been a religious teacher that embodied every aspect of spiritual life so completely. Well, reincarnation and past lives explain a lot about who we are in this life. And a lot of times we may think that we're at a certain point of spiritual readiness or spiritual attraction, when in fact it's our past lives that dictate what we're really ready for. And so we're born into this life having had spiritual experiences in our past. But we can't necessarily pretend that we are someplace that we're not, because our past life experience really shows where we're at in the long run. It will always come out. And in the same way, if we've had really, really strong progress in our past lives, well, that's going to make us much more ready for the meat of spiritual life in this lifetime. Politics do seem very important, and change and historical events that seem major do affect us. But the problem is that we've, as a collective unit, we have clicked in to a reality view that is so old and so repetitive that it goes back 6,000 years, really, to, if you want to take the story of Adam and Eve, it goes back to Adam, and it goes back to the consciousness of individual human initiative being the most important, the greatest power in this world, that what we decide as humans, that there's no higher power, and that in fact there are always at least two powers warring against each other in our world, good and evil. But the problem with separate political or historical detailed situations is this. If we are in this Adamic consciousness, which we have been in for 6,000 years, it doesn't matter. It's the same outworking all the time. That's why history is so repetitive. There's not enough of a breaking out of that consciousness to make any difference whether a politician is saying this or that, or an event takes place that's this or that. It really doesn't matter. That's why nothing is really going to change until there's a major change of consciousness. Collective progress is not going to come from man. Therefore, we are not making collective progress. Collective progress is going to happen in two ways. One is that as a race as a species of beings, we are going to become weary with the situation as it is. And secondly, there are going to be individuals that continue to affect the climate of human life and point toward the new consciousness in such a powerful way that it will begin to affect the collective. But as a collective unit, there's not much we can do. Like we can't try as a collective unit. We can't legislate or make new laws and say, well, but what you can see is that we are moving toward the new consciousness. It's just not our doing. It's happening all on its own, and it's happening because its time has come. If we reach the new consciousness, you'll know it, and it will be an entirely different world. Everything, the values of life will change. We will no longer be materialistic in our values. We will no longer be antagonistic towards other races or, people who look differently than we do. The world will be as one, and the new consciousness will dictate how people think and what people do. All we can do as people living in these modern times, the most important thing we can do is to be open and to shift our gaze from the outer materialistic world that we think is supposed to give us what we need to be happy, and learn to look inward for the answers that we want and for the feelings that we want and for everything that we need. And this is the beginning. If we learn to look inward, that's the right path. It's written in the book of Isaiah, a wonderful book in the Old Testament, that in that day they will beat their swords into plowshares, and the lion will lay down with the lamb, and that's how it will be.